All right, good evening, everybody. And thank you very much for coming out tonight on this beautiful evening. I'm sure there are other things you've been doing, but we're glad you came here tonight to hear what we have to say here about the potential redevelopment of our downtown area. My name is Rick Leaf, and I'm the chairperson of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And once again, welcome, and thank you very much for coming tonight. We're going to be presenting to you kind of where we stand right now in terms of a draft plan for what our redeveloped downtown might look like. And our consultants are going to present kind of what they've come up with to this point. And really the main purpose of the evening is to really solicit your ideas and questions and feedback so we can go back and continue to refine the plan and make it better. The plan would be to have a third meeting, community meeting, a little bit in the future where we'd come back based on the results of tonight's meeting and kind of show you a fairly final plan for what we think is a reasonable thing that could be done, and sort of a plan of attack about how to go about doing it. So I just want to sort of set the stage a little bit. Just as a reminder, this has all been generated by the completion of the last master plan we completed in 2020. And one of the key things that came out of the master plan was quite a bit of feedback from residents about a desire to improve our downtown, to improve the parking, to make it more pedestrian friendly, to bring in different kinds of businesses. And when the Master Plan Implementation Committee was put together to take a look at the plan and to recommend to the town what order to do things in and where to start, it was pretty clear to us that the first thing we needed to do was to look at the downtown. And to that extent, working with the town staff, we hired Weston and Sampson as a consulting company that has had a lot of experience in developing downtown plans. And we've been working with them since the end of last year. And they subcontracted with a company called RKG Associates, which does market analysis. They'll be speaking to you tonight also about some work they've done to take a look at current market conditions in central Massachusetts and things that would make sense for the town of Northborough to consider doing. You're going to see a lot of really nice pictures tonight and a lot of great ideas. You're going to see a lot of proposals to do things with publicly owned land. You're going to see proposals to redevelop privately owned land. This plan does not assume at this point that anything will happen to privately owned land until the current owners decide they might want to participate in a plan like this, or someday they might want to sell their property to a developer that might want to do some development in line with the plan here. There's nothing here, though, that anticipates or requires that any privately owned land in town that's being taken a look at as a potential for redevelopment would actually be done unless the owners of that property were interested in doing it. It's also important to understand that there's a lot of great ideas here. You're going to see things presented in a number of different scenarios. Even though they're numbered scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, that doesn't mean they have to happen in that order. These things can happen in any orders. It makes sense to do them. Parts of these scenarios can be done independent of other parts. Exactly, how we go about doing this over time will be things that'll be worked out. It's also important to understand that none of this can all be done, all at once. It'll be done over a period of years. It will take a certain amount of money to do it. Some of that money hopefully will be grant funding. Some will be private money put in by developers. And there may be a time when there could be warrant articles coming before town meeting to fund some of this also. But that's all kind of stuff that we'll get to down the road. The purpose of tonight is really to have the consultants present their ideas for what could happen and basically get your feedback to say, yeah, that really sounds good and exciting. Let's see if we can make that happen, or no, here are things we think are missing that need to be added, or things we'd like to see changed. So really, once the presentation is over, the whole purpose of the meeting tonight is to get your feedback as to what you're hearing here, and based on what we hear tonight, we'll then go back and continue to work on the plans. The committee has been very excited to work with the consultants so far, and I think you'll see they've come up with a lot of really cool stuff tonight. Once again, though, it's going to take time and money and effort to do it. The main thing tonight is to understand, do we all think we're going down the right path here? So having said all of that, I'm going to turn this over to Jonathan Law. He's our project manager from Weston Sampson, and he's going to sort of introduce the other people on the agenda here. I think it would make sense to let's go through the whole presentation, kind of hear it all through so you can see what it's all about, and then we'll start to take questions and comments at the end, kind of thing. So with that being said, Jonathan, come on up.
Thanks, Rick. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for as Rick said, coming out on a beautiful night to sit through this presentation. We hope that it ticks some boxes, because everything that you see before you, the ideas that we've generated, are based on the first public meeting we had, where we had those stickers that people placed on each one of these locations, or scenarios as we're calling them. So the designs that you see in front of you incorporate all the feedback that we received. We took it back to the office, we looked at that, and we generated these ideas based on that. So sure, we've used some artistic license to come up with these final concepts, but again, the ideas came from the feedback that everybody gave us. And with that, I'll just hand it over to Russ first, who's from RKG.
Good evening, folks. Every good plan has sort of a set of underlying assumptions that went into it to sort of generate what you end up seeing through the concepts. I wanted to share with you a couple facts that we've generated. It's most surface level stuff, just to create a context for you. First question we typically ask is the community growing? Is it healthy? The answer is yes, and in fact, we're adding population at about 1% per year. That's not fast growth, but it's steady growth. Tends to be faster than the county or the state. So in that regard, you know, we are seeing the community grow over time, and that sort of sets the pretext for some of our findings here. Then we ask the question, what segments of the population are actually growing over the last 10 years? This is 2011 to 2021. If you recall, that's a very difficult period, because that's sort of crawling out of the Great Recession in 2011, and 2021 was sort of the low point of the pandemic. So it's a tough time to look at it, but what it shows is that, you know, like other places, we lost a group of the sort of the older millennials, 35 to 44, in town, but also at the county and state level, and we lost some of the children of those folks, probably the younger children. And then where we sort of differed from the county and the state is that we actually saw growth in the number of 45 to 54-year-olds. The significance of that is, number one, these are people who are sort of getting to their peak earning years. Their kids are grown in many respects, or will soon be grown. So it's just something to sort of put in your back pocket and sort of absorb. If you look at income of households locally, you see that I think Northborough tends to be a little bit more affluent than the two areas that we're comparing against. We also created something called the study region, which is mostly those communities that are contiguous to you. They make a sort of a sub-region of the county. It's not until you get up to over 100,000 or 150,000 do you start to see the town have higher percentage of people making higher incomes. So it's difficult to draw a lot of conclusions from these, but you might think that what's happening here is that Northborough tends to be a place that you find habitable once you sort of reach a certain stage in life, maybe an age or your peak earning years. I guess the question would be, if that's true, what happens to those younger populations? Are they able to establish themselves here? We also looked at the change in jobs. Typically, these are the sort of industries or categories of uses that you might find in a downtown. They come in two categories: retail uses, these are shops typically, and office and service establishments. So these are the ones that were showing them the greatest growth during the 2013 to 23 period. Again, a tough time to look at growth in population, and employment, because we're going through such sort of transitional period right now. But what you see is restaurants and eating places have become growing quite rapidly within the region. General merchandise stores, these are things that, they're big categories, but you can see these type of uses in most downtowns. On the service side, these are typically office users. You can see these are managers of companies. These are technical consultants, similar to what we do, perhaps. Computer system design. These are things that sort of work out of small spaces. You're not going to see large office buildings, but you may see some of those in a downtown setting. Now, one of the things we typically do is look at the ownership patterns in places like downtown Northborough, and where you see common colors, those are owned by the same individual. And really what we're looking for is, if we were to move forward on an initiative, it requires the interest and the cooperation of people who own property there. Either they move forward with redevelopment, or they work with others that would move forward with redevelopment. The orange properties are those owned by the town, so those are always sort of in play. This is the former, or soon-to-be former fire department, the new one, the old town hall. So there's properties here that are, you know, I think I would conclude are in important locations. These are properties that were identified as vacant at the time of our, or mostly vacant at the time of our analysis. So that factors in. If they're not going to have a productive use in the future, then they become possible candidates for redevelopment. And what we've concluded is that if you look at these properties, they tend to be located in key areas. This is Main Street, Blake Street. So you can see things that might sort of focus in these areas because there's important properties. Now, what we've done consequently is sort of look at how you might theme these areas. This is where the river is. This is the Harvey property. Again, these are concepts. We're not saying you need to do this. We're just saying if you're going to do this, the setting is right for this type of development: entertainment, dining and residential, shopping services, commercial mixed use. And then I put up the assessed value just so you have a sense of what those properties are valued at. Now, if sort of pulling all this together, I think what you see, and you'll see in greater detail with Jonathan's presentation, is that you have an opportunity along the riverfront that everyone sort of has in their mind's eye, but it's covered up. It's not really open to the public, but it has a lot of potential. You have the ability to sort of create a district downtown that might be based on sort of locally owned dining, entertainment in whatever form you think is appropriate for your community, but we see that there's potential at the old fire station once they move, and you know that's sort of what that is based on. Commercial mixed use, these projects tend to be driven by that concept, the mixture of commercial space on a ground floor with residential above. And then you need more opportunities for shopping and services. That's what people like to do in downtowns. They like to dine, they like to go out, they like to experience a community. And so I think you'll see those elements in the plans that we share with you. Now, just as a sidebar, because we're asking people to consider the future use of their properties, it may mean that what's there today is not functional or meets the needs of the future. So for someone to invest in buying a property, to take down the existing buildings if that's appropriate, and then put up something there, you need some level of density. You have to justify making that upfront cost. And that typically means going up a couple stories. Now, I think your heights are 45 feet in your downtown, so that's sort of the upper limit right now. Residential tends to be a key driver, and you may say, well, we don't really want residential in all cases. That's certainly an option that you can consider and make a final decision on. We need more space for downtown businesses. What you see downtown along Main Street is sort of broken down over many years. There's not a contiguous line of storefronts. And if we want to attract new business, we need to provide the space for them to do that. And you know, a lot of this is closely tied to the traffic movements and the environment for pedestrians. If they can't interact, if they can't feel safe and move about, then it makes it very difficult to do some of these things. And finally, do we have any willing partners who maybe don't see a long-term view for their property and would like to be involved in something that allows them to get back their investment, working with developers or even doing it themselves? We don't know yet. We haven't approached anyone. But that's sort of in the future that would come next. John?
Thanks, Russ. So as part of this study, we were charged with doing some traffic counts along Main Street and West Main Street. I'll go at this at the 10,000 foot view. Our traffic engineer is not here today, but basically, why this study was put together before the town was that we needed to understand what the traffic patterns were on Main Street and what they would be on Main Street if we reduced the road diet. So we went out there, did some traffic counts, and then ran that data in the programs that we have that tells us or predicts what the traffic or the backup will be should we take a lane away. So the yellow lines that you see are basically the traffic patterns today, and by that I mean that the length of the waiting times at each one of these intersections. The red lines indicate that if we took a lane away through this section of downtown, what that actually means. So you can see over here on Main Street that the backup would be significant. Same as we go on West Main Street heading eastbound, again, significant backup to an already pretty substantial line of traffic. And this is AM peak hours. So we ran AM peak hours, PM peak hours. So this is PM peak hours. So you can see that, you know, the red lines, again, are a lot more significant in their length based on what the traffic patterns are today. So again, 10,000-foot elevation looking at this. What that means is really that the road diet in downtown today cannot really be changed in terms of number of lanes. And I think MassDOT recently did, you know, downtown Northborough, and you know, obviously they designed it the way they did to suit the traffic patterns of today. So we actually approached MassDOT and asked them, you know, would they be open to any changes to downtown based on this information that we're showing them, and they were reluctant to commit to wanting to add to the amount of traffic that is there today or the amount of backup that is there today. So unfortunately, it looks like that Route 20 will have to remain as it is. That doesn't mean that we can't beautify, you know, parts of Route 20, but in terms of trying to widen sidewalks without buying or acquiring properties that are adjacent to the street, it's a pretty hard sell. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk through 4 scenarios today, and these scenarios are all based on the 4 scenarios that we gave at the first public meeting. If everybody was there, you all remember the great sticker charade that we all put on. You know, everybody got a packet of stickers and, you know, gave us their thoughts in the simplest format of placing these stickers in the areas that they wanted to see these certain attributes. So the 4 study areas that you'll see today, I'll talk through, is again Harvey's, and then we have Blake Street here that encapsulates the existing fire station. We have the area around the Common on Gale Street, and then the West Main Street and Main Street. So this is a breakdown of what we heard, or the main talking points that we heard from people when they placed their stickers or gave their ideas of each one of these areas. So I'll go through each one of these in turn. And I'll just point out that we've been meeting with the MPIC committee on numerous occasions on a monthly basis. And these ideas that we've generated today have been introduced to them. We've had feedback from them that we've incorporated into these. And I won't say this is the final master plan, because obviously we want feedback today, but it's the master plan where it stands at this point. So after receiving all that feedback, we put together a simple bubble diagram. And again, without going into too much detail, we wanted to figure out, well, what could we fit in each one of these areas, you know, based on the feedback that we were given. So if we look at Blake Street, you know, people talked about public open space, which you can see in the green. They talked about residential and areas for cafe and dining. So, you know, this is a simple diagram to show what that may look like. If we go over to the Harvey property, again, public open space was key, access to the river, which is a great amenity that's not really used today. And then, again, an area for housing or mixed-use development, so commercial with housing above that. Then if we look across over at the area by Gale Street, again, housing was a key component to that, and also mixed-use residential. So as I mentioned before, restaurants, cafes, bars, shops, and then on the stories above that would also include residential. So if we look at scenario 1, which we're calling the entertainment hub, we blame me for these name nomenclature. I came up with these ideas. If you don't like them, that's an easy change. And if that's the only comment, we're doing pretty good. So if you look, we have Blake Street here, which is turned into a one-way, what we're calling a one-earth. And a one-earth in design terms is basically a street that has no dedicated, like in some instances there's a vehicular road and there's sidewalks, but the cars are dominant. If the width of the roadway is wider than the sidewalks, then the dominant vehicle or user is a car. In this scenario, we have a one-earth, which is designed to be a one-way street that has no curbs. The separation from cars that would drive down here in a slow movement would be through the form of paving, bollards, trees. We would have parking on one side of the street here. The Old Town Hall would be redeveloped into restaurants, bars with housing above. And then the 4 magenta buildings would be, again, mixed use. So at ground level, there'd be cafes, shops, restaurants, bars, and above would be residential units. We would have a new parking garage to help service all this new residential development on the existing parking lot that is located behind CVS. Obviously, pedestrian connectivity is key, so we'd have lots of pedestrian connectivity, small plazas behind the building here between CVS that can facilitate farmers markets and things of that nature. Then adjacent to the rail track, we heard that public art is a big key component for some people in downtown. So there's a location here for public art. And again, the renderings that you'll see today are, we've used artistic license for these. So you'll see the sculpture, you might, well, I don't like that sculpture. We want you to focus on the spaces rather than the elements themselves, if that makes sense. And then obviously getting connections to the existing fire station, which would be a great location for, again, another restaurant. Maybe there's a coffee shop, donut shop along Pierce Street. And then in the back, there could be, like I said, a retail development or a cafe with a plaza, and then connections to the Coldbrook Harbor and the riverfront walkway there. So we're just going to zoom in with a couple of sort of focused renderings. So if you follow the arrow, it gives you the location of where this rendering is looking. So this is looking up Blake Street. So as I mentioned before, there's parking down one side. There's all new street trees. Stormwater management is a key component, reducing urban heat island effect. We heard that people are really passionate about that and getting a lot more trees planted downtown. Helps for many, many different reasons. Down one side, we have, again, some parking areas for food truck parking, and if there is the desire to close this street down, again, this could be a perfect location for Applefest. If you go to the bottom left of the screen, this is approaching the sculptural area, so we've got seating areas for gathering, and again, this is kind of a focal point that is on the axis between the Old Town Hall and this new mixed-use residential building. As we head further up this plaza space, again, I talked about, there's locations here for farmers markets, easy access to parking and pull in here. Maybe in the wintertime, that's a location for an ice rink. The key here is that flexibility is the major part of the designs. Then if we go onto the far side, in between CVS and these two new buildings, again, another smaller plaza space here with communal seating, and again, flexibility is key as this design. Now we're flipping back, looking back from Blake Street back towards West Main Street. So Pierce Street is up here. Existing building in white will remain. In between that and the new mixed-use residential and the parking garage, we have this new little pocket park, again, to provide some green, open space in downtown where people can hang out in small or fairly large numbers. And this is another view looking from this side of the street into this pocket park, and then, as I mentioned, the aerial view here. Back in the main section of Blake Street, as I mentioned, the vehicular access or the street is divided up by paving patterns or different colors in the pavement, no vertical curbs, but the pedestrian zone or main pedestrian zone is highlighted and delineated by the street trees, and then obviously within the center of that is a place that pedestrians can circumnavigate, but also there'll be cars driving down here at slow speeds. And this is a design feature that you'll see all over Europe. This is not my idea because I'm from England, but this is something that's been done very successfully for many, many years in many, many countries in Europe. And as I mentioned before, on the backside of this development in the town hall, again, another place for a small urban plaza with cafe, dining spaces, and the opportunity for farmers markets and things of that nature. Just some sections through these spaces so you can see, the new buildings, the heights of those and the scale, and in the relation to the open space and how Blake Street looks adjacent to that. Parking behind these new buildings, and then obviously the existing rail track, and providing some buffer between that space and this new development. Lower section again, off-street parking behind. Flexible plaza space, new buildings. Again, Blake Street with the level topography and places for people to have dining and street trees and places for food trucks and things of that nature. And then as we look at the bottom section, again, coming through this section, you'll see the sculptural area here and the plaza screening from the train tracks, and then again Blake Street with this multi-purpose functionality of sharing the space with cars, vehicles, bikes and pedestrians. Then as we flip to the old fire station property, again we feel like this is a great place for mixed use. So it could be a restaurant in the back, so we've designed a plaza here with some type of trellis system, dining area, new parking adjacent to this, so this parking would serve this lot itself. And then against the front of the street, we have sort of smaller little plaza spaces. Again, if there's a coffee shop in here or a donut shop or something, then there's also new parking adjacent to that. So this rendering here, again, is looking from this parking area into this space. So you can see tables and chairs screening from the parking, incorporating, again, lots of new trees. As we flip around, aerial view on this pedestrian connection as we come back down to the Colebrook Harbour trail system. So again, a nice open lawn. Could be gently sloped, a place for a concert. You could have a concert on this space and have people sitting there and watching this concert. And then as we flip around, again, looking back towards this trellis and outside dining/terrace space. And just some sections through those spaces. So you can see I'll focus on this bottom one. We've got the new parking, sidewalk, and then as we come through the building, we have this plaza, amenity terrace, and then the slope down lawn area with a connection to the river walk beyond. So what does that mean in terms of numbers for this area? So we tallied up all these numbers, and the flexible plaza space is roughly 21,000 square feet. If we combine everything that's in here, pocket parks equate to just less than 16,500 square feet. Restaurant cafes, 14,000, retail same 14,000. And then multifamily housing, 84,000 square feet. We're using an approximate number of 1,000 square feet per unit, so that equates to 84 units. The parking garage would accommodate 96 spaces. We have 22 spaces on the street here, and then 32 spaces in this parking lot here. Before I go into this, we've developed some 3D renderings of each one of these scenarios. So I'd like to show that before we talk about the next one. So just give me a second. Everybody okay with that scenario? Any questions? Well, we'll leave questions till the end. So this is the scenario to the Harvey property. So as all of you know today, this is a great site, underutilized with the Harvey property today. And what's available or the opportunities here we think are super exciting. So again, combination here of mixed use development, housing, lots and lots of public open space, a trail system adjacent to the Assabet. Sorry, gone too far. So this is, again, similar diagrams you saw in the first scenario. This is the feedback that we received at the first meeting. So, people wanted to see all these elements within this property. So, again, street trees, parking, mixed-use housing, retail, bars, cafes, trail systems. So, again, we took that information and we came up with this master plan design for this specific area. So you can see two-way travel lane from Hudson down to Main Street, parking on both sides of the street, sidewalks, street trees. So in essence, a complete street. We have, again, adjacent to the Assabet, this new trail system with public open space for gathering on large and small numbers. And again, this connects all the way up to Hudson. Across Hudson, then a trail that comes through the existing woodland that we can retain in this area and brings you back down to a new children's playground in this space here. So again, just go through some of these renderings. This is kind of just as you enter from Main Street, looking at this space here. So again, kind of a generator building on the corner, mixed use, cafe spaces, place for shopping, and then above that would be residential. And then obviously some public open space that is adjacent to the building, but wonderful connections to this new trail system that comes up adjacent to the Assabet. Bottom right image is looking at this open lawn area, places for people to sit, benches, movable tables and movable furniture, but just a wonderful opportunity for people to get back down close to the riverfront and connect to nature. As we walk back up, you can either come up the sidewalk here, again, nice wide sidewalks, and at this portion you can either cross the street to the playground parking area, or you can keep walking up the sidewalk, or again, take this connection to the trail system that brings you closer to the river. And then finally, this crosswalk connection, again, that brings you to the new children's playground. A couple more views. Bottom right, again, sort of an aerial view looking back at this space. Another aerial view looking at moments along this trail system where we have shade structures. Again, areas for people to take some rest from, walking this, get a break from the elements. So along the way, there's benches and places for people to sit and take a break. Bottom right, another aerial image of the children's playground. And then as we look up, again, the trail system here, the new two-way street, parking, new surface parking that services this children's playground, and then the residential buildings here. So there's 3 residential units in this master plan section, and then 2 mixed use. And so we're now back up at Hudson Street, looking down towards Main Street. So again, just some more views of how we can cross this road, introducing bump outs. So the crossing widths are a lot narrower for pedestrians. So you only cross across the travel lanes and not the 4 lanes for parking and travel. Again, another view of the connections to the trail system and how that relates to the new road. We have an overlook here for this view down to the Assabet. Again, another shade structure with seating. And then, again, as I talked about, some trail system through these existing woods that would remain. Some sections through. So We start off at the top. This is the trail system through the existing woods. I talked about the overlook space, new buildings, complete street, again new building, and then connections down to the riverfront walk. Middle one, again existing woodland with a new trail through, a new building, connections to the new complete street, and then also the public open space down to the riverfront trail. And again, the bottom one. In the background, residential building with the children's playground, complete streets, 2 rows of parking, vehicular travel in both lanes, and then connections back down again to the Assabet River. So what does that mean in terms of how we broke this down? So again, flexible plaza, just less than 10,000 square feet, playground, 4,600. Trails, an open space, 220,000 square feet. So I think if any town or city could, add that to their existing fabric of their, environment, that would be a huge selling point to me. If I was looking to move to Northborough and I had this trail system and you could sell that, I mean, it's worth its weight in gold. Mixed use and multifamily housing. Equates to 163 units, again using that 1,000 square foot sweet spot per unit. Retail, commercial, restaurant, 10,000 each. On-street parking, 75 spaces. Surface parking lots, 40 spaces, and then the parking spaces would be 200. And you're probably wondering, well, where the hell are those parking garages? Where is that? So these residential units would be 4 stories, and there would be parking at ground level. So you would enter in the building and then either would wrap some residential units around the parking so you wouldn't see that, and the residential would continue above, or the facade of this structure would hide the parking. So that's how it's typically done a lot these days in an urban environment, and we felt that was the best solution here. And most attractive to any type of developer who'd want to do this, rather than taking, for example, one of these buildings and make it purely a parking garage. The return on investment for them there is not that great. So if you can incorporate parking into housing, then that's a much better sell. And I'll just do the fly-through again. I'll add music to the next time, just so it's a little bit more entertaining. I would sing, but you don't want that. And again, this is only a 5-minute walk from the current downtown. So again, to have this amenity so close and in walking distance to downtown would be wonderful. So this is scenario 3. Again, blame me for the name, Assabet Mill. So this is by Gale Street, West Main Street, and South Street. And again, this area focuses a lot on urban mixed-use redevelopment, and housing. So you'll see the blue bars or purple bars are purely housing, and the magenta or pink blocks are a mixture of commercial, retail, and also housing. New street that connects to the existing entry-exit point onto West Main Street. I think today, if you recall, the street kind of weaves its way through, so it would be a straight connection through to Gale Street. In this scenario, on West Main Street and Main Street, because this whole site has been looked at, we've pulled the curb edge back so we could actually get some parking on Main Street here, some parallel parking, and street trees and wider sidewalks that again connect to the town common, the new fire station down West Main Street. We have a surface parking lot and then parallel parking surrounding the entire site. Within the center of this space is a new public open space that again could be used for outside dining, cafes, restaurants, and that's wrapped with this interior loop road. These houses are designed to be townhomes, so again with the scale somewhat similar to the architecture that's on the opposite side of South Street and then the neighborhood in Assabet Park over here. So if we zoom in, looking up from West Main Street, down this again complete street, 2-lane travel lane, wide sidewalks, street trees, parking on both sides. As we come down to the bottom as an aerial view looking at this new surface parking lot and how we have new connections to the existing town common. The lower right focuses on this new urban plaza that would be used for residents or people visiting this space. And again, this is all, you know, the old town hall is straight right across the street here, so we're real downtown. And then this image here, again, is focusing on this new urban plaza, sort of green open space that you can see there's places for movable table and chairs, locations for dining. Then another view looking over more from above at this space, you know, again, place for food trucks to park, to generate people down here and sort of help to facilitate enjoyment and outside dining. We look at this pedestrian crossing. Again, we're trying to make things safe for people to cross the street, so we're incorporating bump outs into these spaces so people are only crossing the travel lanes themselves. Another view of this urban plaza, some type of community bench seating, movable tables and chairs and trolley structure. And then as we come down to this top right image, you know, this is kind of the welcome plaza from the opposite side of Main Street into this development, some type of signage, you know, signature trees here, a new plaza, and then sort of on the axis here again, another location for artwork. Just some more sections through these spaces. So as I mentioned, you know, we've got Route 20 here, new mixed-use building, 2-lane travel lane with on-street parking. Then we've got the flexible plaza space in the middle, the lower mixed-use building, and then the townhomes closer to Gale Street. Middle section again focuses on Assabet Park connection here to the town common. Off-street parking, the new 2-way complete streets, new mixed-use building, and the flexible plaza space, and then the interior loop road, and then the smaller scale housing townhomes that are adjacent to South Street. And then again, finally, bottom section, access to the town common and Assabet Park, complete street, 2-way traffic parking, wider sidewalks, street trees, stormwater management, green infrastructure, the mixed-use development and how we bring the scale down a little bit as it meets this new housing over here. So what does that mean? Flexible plaza space, 11,000 square feet. Pocket park, 6,800. Trails, 400 linear feet that again connect to other parts downtown. Mixed use and multifamily housing, a total of 75, 101. Retail, commercial space, 30,000 square feet each. And then 109 on-street parking spaces and 20 spaces in the lot. And I'll just show. We're not saying everybody has to drive white cars, by the way. So I think you'll notice with all the scenarios, even though this is like in an urban downtown, we're trying to green up these spaces and incorporate measures to help reduce the amount of stormwater that goes into the underground surfaces. Street trees help, as I mentioned before, likes to help to reduce urban heat island effect, help with stormwater management, actually studies have shown they slow car traffic down when you drive down a tree-laden street. So again, even though these are in an urban environment and a downtown, it doesn't feel like that because we've greened it up so much. With the program we use, there's not many options for sculpture, but we wanted to spread love at this meeting anyway, so. I knew someone would say that. So as I mentioned earlier, traffic studies meant that we couldn't really produce or make any changes to the width of the sidewalks except in locations that I just talked about here. But as I also previously mentioned, that doesn't mean that we can't make some changes that may help downtown and how people use it. So this section on the right is the existing section today, so pretty narrow sidewalks, as everybody knows, dominated by utility poles and infrastructure. So we looked at, well, it's simple, not simple, and really not inexpensive, but burying the utilities and replacing the lights with something more pedestrian scale, maybe banners to bring a bit of color and texture into the downtown would go a long way, even though we're not widening sidewalks. And then in some locations that I mentioned where we can widen a couple of sidewalks, just incorporating street trees to help with that urban feel and bring some human scale down to the street below. Then in places where we can't really plant street trees, that doesn't mean that we can't have movable planters that, again, have seasonal planting, have trees within them. Maybe there's a business improvement district that's created that retailers and people want to contribute, and they maintain these things. So again, just because we can't really change the width of the sidewalks doesn't mean that that's the end of the world. Then we looked at lighting, again, if we can get rid of utilities and bring in more pedestrian scale lighting, something that's more aesthetically pleasing, LED, dark sky compliant, more attractive, combining pedestrian and roadway lighting in something that's much more sleek and appealing to the eye. And then how can we light storefronts in a nice way, in an aesthetically pleasing way. Then signage, window signage, top right, blade signs, Then how do we have sign bans on buildings? or sign bans on awnings. You know, there's so many options out there. And then, you know, to find your way around all these new spaces, you know, a wayfinding element throughout downtown that, again, brings some consistency. And then this is the last slide that I'll finish with. It shows all the scenarios together in relation to, you know, West Main Street and Main Street. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Like I said, there's a lot of ideas in front of us, but the idea is, does this make sense? Does it strike people the right way? Are there other suggestions, comments? You know, really the floor is open now to just hear what you think about all of this. Once again, how we do it, when we do it, how much it's going to cost to do it, those are all questions that will have to be addressed as we get on the road. The main thing is to just have a kind of a community agreement, understanding around, is this what we really want to see in downtown Northborough? If it is, then we can work towards doing it over time. But I guess the main thing we're interested in this evening is just to start to get people's feedback, comments, questions, concerns, anything that we can take to continue to modify the plan. So with that, I'll start. Go ahead.
I have a question either for the planner or somebody from the planning board. Is there a height restriction on buildings downtown?
Yes. I believe it's 45 feet today.
Which is how many stories?
It's like 3 stories.
Okay, because some.
Hey, Laura, why don't you come up here? If you haven't met her yet, Lori Connors, our town planner, who did a wonderful job in the town of Newbury with that downtown revitalization.
Yeah, pretty much all of the zoning districts in the town of Northborough do have height limitations. And the uses, of course, are specified in the use chart. So if this is the scheme that folks are interested in going forward with, then there would have to be pretty significant changes to the zoning bylaw.
The reason I asked that was some of his mixed-use buildings appeared to be 5, 6, 7, and that would completely destroy what the town looks like.
The highest building in any of these scenarios is 48 feet.
Is what?
48 feet.
Which equals how many stories?
4.
4. Still kind of high.
Way back years ago, when we started the master plan, if I remember, your statement said you wanted a quaint, vibrant downtown. This doesn't look quaint to me, with all these buildings. And the other question, how many apartments are in this, if you take the whole complex, all 3 scenarios, how many apartments does this add to the town? And how many school children does this add to the town?
Do you know that answer to that question?
I think you said like 89.
So there's a combination of apartments, probably condominiums, and townhomes. I think the total is around 350. I'm not sure how that breaks out. I think it's be weighted more towards apartments. So that's the general sort of total there. It's about 39,000 square feet of commercial service office space, about the same amount for restaurants, dining, entertainment, about 490 something parking spaces, some of those private, some of those public. So that's kind of what the numbers look like right now.
So that was how many apartments did you say? 300? About 300?
There's 350 units, including townhomes and condominiums and apartments. So I would think the biggest portion is apartments.
Right now we're concerned with 52 new apartments at the White House facility.
And over time, as we go through the plan and build it out, the exact number of units will be somewhat different. It's here It probably will not be more, it could be less kind of thing. It all depends on what the feeling of the town is going forward. If there's a feeling that that number of units is excessive, it doesn't have to be that many. I think the point that was made was that to attract development and to make it commercially viable, there has to be some mix of residential and commercial. Right.
So, I like the plan, but I think the RE plan, that lot, as you had mentioned, would be a fantastic spot for revitalization on the river. I guess my question to all of you is, traffic can't change. How do you drop 350, 300 condos, apartments into a town where traffic can't change? Now, understanding that you're not going to do it all at once, it's segmented and incremental, you build it. But how do you solve that problem? In addition to that question, have the town considered the impact to fire, police, DPW? I assume all departments would have to be increased because the increase in population, condos, the retail injection to the town, etc. All that would be require additional services from our town, which again is going to increase your tax base, taxes that I pay on a daily basis. And those are tough questions. And again, I certainly think these are well thought out plans and great ideas, but there has to be some thought made about those things as well.
And I think that
we're the ones paying for that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the numbers have shown that our population has been growing in town, probably will continue to grow in town, and so the question is probably going to have to be more housing capacity created over time. Whether this is the right number, whether it all belongs in the downtown, is something we're going to have to work our way through. But to the extent that we may have to create more housing in town over town to manage population growth, some of that can happen in the downtown area. But I understand where you're coming from. If the population is going to be growing, regardless of how we manage that, those kinds of things you talked about as far as impact on fire and schools and police, one way or another will have to be handled. This was just an approach for how some of that could be handled in the downtown area.
Yeah, I can help you with a couple metrics. I showed you in the population slide those 10 years, the town added 1,400 plus population. I estimated that might be something close to 700 housing units for those people. Now that could be existing that were vacant and then occupied, or new ones. If this is 350 units times maybe 2.5 people per unit, then you can have some order of magnitude understanding of what that would be. Now, we're not saying that 350 units is the right number for you, but that's sort of a way of comparing this.
So is the final metric, track that over the years of development required? This isn't a 2-year plan, this is a 5 to 10-year plan.
No.
So
Could
when
be
you
a
do that,
50-year plan.
it's a 5-year plan?
Could be a 50-year plan.
50-year plan.
So we're talking hundreds of people, new people in the downtown
Over a
over,
pretty long time.
could be decades, yeah, could be decades.
And we're already growing at that, I guess
This would
the
be
math says we're already kind of growing at that rate.
Yeah.
I guess that was part of the point, that the plan tried to factor in population growth. It tried to factor in the fact that to attract private development over time, some residential component needs to be combined, and so they kind of put together. But I can understand, some of the concern being expressed tonight about this many units going into the downtown in a short period of time. And the question is, the number of units is open to discussion, and the amount of time will be an extended period of time for them to be built wherever they're going to be built in town. Go ahead.
First of all, I just want to say thank you. This is really well done. It really helps show some stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that people can ask about that are in the background that helps you do all this. Can you, with that in mind, can you just please go into a little bit, you mentioned Lori's done some stuff in Millbury. We obviously, Hudson's downtown, they just renovated it. It's amazing. Can you go into some of the benefits that we have? So, remember, a young family, right? We have kids in elementary school, they're going to be here forever. And so this is really looking like it's attracting younger professional families. So what other, and businesses, right? So what other like tax revenue can we look forward to with some of these new restaurants, bars, et cetera, shopping, et cetera, attracting revenue from outside the town in? Can you go into that a little bit?
Not probably a lot more to say than yes to all of that. I mean, the idea would be to provide a more attractive, useful area for the people who are currently in town, to attract additional business and tax revenue into town, and to continue to make Northborough a more desirable place to live and work.
Do we have any, so I guess to ask you more specifically, do we have any comps with like Millbury before and after, or Hudson before and after, Northborough before and after? Could you go into that for a minute or two?
Sure. I can speak to the Millbury example if you want. Okay. So I was a town planner in Millbury for a very long time, 16 years. And Millbury Center went through a sad time where we had a lot of vacancies, there was a lot of trash, and people kind of had turned their back on the center. So we were trying to look for ideas on how we could rejuvenate the downtown. And it actually started with a process very similar to this. The first step was actually an adopt a pot and tree program. Then we started a banner program. And that ended up raising some money. And we ended up getting a grant to do a downtown revitalization visioning series similar to this. And Weston and Sampson helped us on that. And they came up with a great vision for downtown, and we were able to leverage quite a bit of grant money. So our phase 1 downtown revitalization project cost a little over $2 million, and about 73% of that was paid for with grant money, and then the balance was paid with town appropriation. So if you go to Millbury Center, you can see the phase 1 project is complete. That focused on common improvements. We pretty much just tackled the public realm. So we did the sidewalks over, we did decorative streetlights, we did a lot of plantings, a lot of street trees. We narrowed some of the intersections. We did some fancy crosswalks, quite a bit of just streetscape, we did seating and pedestrian plazas and kind of these neat little spaces where people could gather. And that got the private sector super excited. So then they started investing in their buildings. So we started to see a number of the buildings do exterior upgrades, started adding awnings, they did signage improvements. We got some grant money for a mural that was put on a storefront that faces the common. And so that, not only did the state get super excited about that, the funders got super excited. So that propelled us into a phase 2 project. That project is about $2.5 million, and that's under construction now. So if you go into Millbury Center, it's a mess. But it just expanded. Now it's redoing the municipal parking lot. There's some improvements on the town hall where the Asa Waters mansion is. So it's just super exciting because also multifamily housing. When I first started telling people that we needed multifamily housing to support the downtown businesses, nobody believed me. What are you doing? You're ruining our downtown. We don't need multifamily housing. Well, we have a 72-unit luxury apartment building, a complex, a 12-unit, another 47-unit that's under construction now. And now there is more life in the downtown than there's been ever since I've worked with the town and lived in the town. So now it's become kind of this bustling center. So we have a microbrewery, we have a distillery, of course the Draft House Cinema is still there. The storefronts are starting to fill up. There are still a couple of vacancies, but not nearly to the extent. So sometimes when you just make one change to the public realm, then others just jump on the bandwagon and they get excited. So I think that that's a good example of what could happen here.
Thank you. As a really quick follow-up, when I was at Worcester, they were trying to do downtown revitalization multiple times, depending on how those were. And they had trigger buildings, and so from like phases, just to clarify, are we looking at doing, is the idea to do one of these, because there's scenario 1, 2, 3, or are these like as phases? Is it maybe do one, maybe do more than one? Can you
Well, of course, what the town has control over is the public realm. So whenever, like, you know, if you go to the town of Millbury now, you can see how disruptive to a downtown a construction project is. So I would never, ever recommend doing all phases simultaneously. It's just too much. And it's aggravating to the shop owners, it's aggravating to the residents, it's aggravating to the automobiles driving through town, so you never want to do that. So from a cost perspective as well as a logistics perspective, it is better to break it into chunks. And then I have no idea which one would be the first one. Possibly it's the fire station, because of course we're about to embark on a new fire station project, so that might be phase 1. Or it could be Blake Street, but chances are that will be the public realm. So of course, the town doesn't own several of those parcels. So if the private property owners don't want to do anything with their buildings, then nothing's going to be done with their buildings until either they sell or they change their minds. So that is the limit, is of course, we only have control of the public realm.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that? Comparing Hudson and Millbury to Northborough, they had really, I don't know about Millbury Center, but Hudson has great bones. It had those beautiful brick buildings that were just waiting to be rehabbed. So Northborough doesn't have the good bones, so we would need private developers to come in and kind of build to a vision. Is that practicable? Do you see that happening in other localities in Massachusetts?
Yeah, you know, there is a lot of opportunity. You know, Northborough's center, so there are some locations, like at the corner of School Street. There are buildings that are right up to the edge. So there are various locations where that happens, like the cafe is, so it's not a matter of blow up the downtown and start all over again. There is some really nice architecture in the downtown, of course the historic town hall. So it's a matter of filling in the gaps. Millbury has some really bad architecture too. But there can be improvements, like they can redo the facade and, you know, keep the building. Also, I know one thing that our committee has been talking about is sign and facade grant program. So, you know, maybe the building's going to stay there, but maybe if the liquor store has a really nice awning and some nice signage, that would make a world of difference. So it doesn't have to be a drastic change. It could start small and then snowball.
I'll just add to that I worked on Concord Main Street in Concord, New Hampshire, that streetscape project that was very contentious when it began. If anybody knows Concord, it used to be a 4-lane highway that basically went through downtown. Narrow sidewalks, inaccessible, no ADA compliance. On one side of the street was a double curbed step, so if you parked your car, you had to try and get up these double curbed steps if you were elderly or unable to walk very well. And the storefronts were empty because people argued or shop owners argued that if someone doesn't park outside my store, they're not going to come in and spend money. And the bigger picture was that it was so unaccessibly pleasing, so hard to circumnavigate, getting from one side of the street to the other. You're crossing 6 lanes with the parking. People just didn't want to do that. And so we went in there with a design that reduced it to 1 lane in each way. What that meant is that we could have nice wide sidewalks. I think we went from 3 dead street trees to over 100. There were incorporated local materials, granite into seating areas. Like I said, much wider sidewalks. Every building became accessible, so there were no more steps into the buildings. I think it was a $10 million project. They got some Tiger grants and things of that nature. But what that did, it was a catalyst for other property owners and private developers who had property on this street to be like, hey, wow, this is a great idea. People are coming back downtown. Storefront ownership and the number of people working downtown now, the numbers went through the roof. There was hardly any vacancies. A hotel came downtown. A commercial development came downtown. So this streetscape project was a catalyst for the rest of downtown Concord. And if you do research, it was a fabulous project. And 5-10 years later, people still love it, and it's still generating new development in the city.
Thanks to both of these groups. It's an amazing job that you've done here. Very good. I love it. Big concern. This seems like an urbanization of Northborough Center rather than moving towards the quaint New England village. It's sort of the antithesis of that, it seems to me, too. And with the number of purple and other purple buildings that are mixed use or residential, 300 units, the amount of housing being squished into an area where the traffic's already massive at times of the day, it really concerns me. Some of this paint was green. I would feel a lot better about it. It feels like far too much new housing in a downtown area that's already got traffic issues with it. And again, it feels like being repetitive. It feels like it's urbanizing downtown Northborough rather than making it a New England village. And I guess I was hoping for more of that.
Yeah, well, definitely, this question of housing and residential is coming up over and over again. It's something we'll go back and we'll look into again. As far as quaintness, village, one of the issues going to be in trying to manage the Route 20 situation, we're going to be limited as to what we can do. Laurie did mention storefronts, facades, signage. I think there's a way to make the buildings look less modern and urban and more residential or country, but short of what we did with the Common, the ability to turn the center of Northborough into something looking like a quaint village is going to be more difficult. To the extent that we can expand parking, expand walkability, and bring in the kind of businesses that people are looking to see, I think that will accomplish a lot of what came out of the original master plan. And then if things can be done with exterior building design to sort of make things look like what people like them to look like, there's probably some possibility there.
One of the benefits, and perhaps 350 isn't that number, and maybe it could be more townhouses and fewer garden-style apartments. But one of the benefits of having housing in your downtown is that's how you achieve the pedestrian-friendly downtown. So if you have people who live in your downtown, they're the ones that are going to go out the door and they're going to walk to CVS. They're not going to get in their car and drive to CVS. And, they're going to walk to the library and walk to the pizza shop. And so although those people will likely, although there are a lot of people who work from home, commute back and forth to work, so certainly they will need cars. The hope of having a downtown like this where you have a lot of housing is that you are serving the needs of people who don't like to drive everywhere. So there's that benefit.
Following up on that, we don't have any bus connection to any commuter rail stops. And would you think that for these areas, which would have projected a lot of additional residents, do you think that might draw in the interest of the MBTA for adding a bus stop in downtown Northborough, would serve these people as well as others in the area, might cut down on the impact of traffic of this type of development?
So, in Millbury, the Shops of Blackstone Valley, I remember it was built when I first got there. The planning board required them to put a bus station up at the shops. Took 2 years to get the WRTA to actually bring the bus there. And now it's a really popular bus route. So they have a stop in Millbury Center, and they have a stop at the Shops of Blackstone, and they ultimately go to Union Station in Worcester. So if there's enough demand, the WRTA will come.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question about scenario 2 kind of thing. I think I'm just a little confused about the geography.
Yeah.
And some of it maybe that my eyesight wasn't good enough to read things. But could we go back to that picture of scenario 2?
Sure.
I'm just trying to figure out the boundaries.
So the overall boundary is the existing Harvard property right now. If you're familiar with that property that Harvey owns,
Okay.
down at the bottom of the hill.
So the pink line up at the top is Hudson Street?
Yes.
And that's Main Street.
Yeah.
And the pink line over on the right is
River Street.
River Street?
Yeah.
What's going on with the river? Because, I mean, the Assabet River does not cross Hudson Street.
Colebrook crosses Assabet goes to, right? That's at the confluence of the two rivers?
Right, Cold Harbor Brook crosses kind of underneath the road,
right,
I think.
and the Assabet peels off.
Right, so the Assabet's running off over there.
Right, it's just a little glitch, but it's all parallel to the Assabet until it's Colebrook, and at that confluence where the retail's drawn, like Hudson, that old brick mill building could actually be renovated. And what's really cool about it, if you go there, to the east of it, there's a big 2-foot concrete platform underneath it. Colebrook goes, and imagine sitting there.
They knocked some of that down, and you can actually see Colebrook on the other side.
But if you sit there with a bunch of picnic tables and watch the confluence of the river and have retail in the old mill building, it could be a really cool environment.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that, because it would be interesting if that could be expanded a little bit.
So we didn't have any topographical survey for this study, so there may be some slight inaccuracies, but for the most part, it's, we try to replicate what's there.
Right. If you get near Hudson Street, the river takes a right turn and parallels Hudson Street.
Yeah, right.
The Colebrook spills right there. So,
Go ahead.
So I'm really impressed by the drawings. I didn't hear anybody address the CSX train, which goes right through the center, and their rights in terms of right-of-way and easement and whatever. Is that something to consider? And also, I live on School Street in a building where the train goes right behind my building, and I'm not sure 4 stories of residential building wants to butt up against a noisy, very slow train. Twice a day. I mean, they keep it slow because the tracks are in such poor condition. It goes, 5 or 10 miles an hour.
what times a day?
It's weird. There's no schedule. It's a freight line.
Yes, as far as I understand, the train service was taken as a given. It will just continue, the way this kind of thing.
Do they have much right-of-way on either side of the track, and how do they control it? I saw them working behind off Pierce today. They must be replacing the ties.
Well, I think my understanding is that whatever's been projected here in the plan is within the town's right of way and outside of CS6's right of way, so we're not building anything out closer to the track than we could already build. As far as the
You have no mention at all of the impact of a freight line, that's all.
yeah, I guess part of it was that, I guess for the amount of times a day the train comes through, it doesn't come through, you know, once in a while. It's not like it's a constant train service going back, like commuter rail going back and forth on the track. So we'll give that some consideration. We did not give it a lot of consideration today.
Yeah, my other is that, isn't Northborough obliged to build 40A housing because we're an MBTA adjacent community?
Yes.
And so that would be not here.
Right.
This wouldn't count, would it?
It could. It could.
So that would be an
have-
advantage if that would count.
Yeah, so we're obligated by the changes to the zoning act. So this is Mass General Law to create up to about 50 acres of land in Northborough. There would be by right multifamily at a minimum density of 15 units per acre. So we could choose. I particularly been eyeing the Harvey property.
Yeah.
Because it's 10 acres, so that would be a big.
Because we have to do it anyway.
We
because
do
it's a
have to
state
do it.
law. And it's not like
Absolutely.
Northborough can say, no, I don't want to build that house.
Correct. That's correct.
Maybe in addition to the question of public housing, when we have to build so many houses, I would like to see more congested housing, maybe opposite of some other opinions here, to have some unique feature in the town. So it looks like each of the diagram looks like normal and nothing special when you drive through, but the unique feature would be an Italian village or consortium. With this saying is also, I'm perplexed with the parking. Were any thoughts giving underground parking to eliminate basically underground parking, and with this of course cost, self-speaking, but also flash floods, which maybe the Elizabeth River have in the future. So this kind of climate change predicament which we may face in terms of designing this kind of features. So that would be one. And then what I miss also, when you said trail, how is the trails linked with other trails which are already there? So this, maybe that would be also helpful to impact this.
All good suggestions. I think as it relates to parking underground, obviously surface parking is at one cost. That structured parking is at another cost. It's about 5 to 10,000, 25 to 30,000. You go down below, it's over 40,000 per space. So I think then it becomes an economic decision. Can we actually build what we're talking about and incur that cost? And I think the result is probably not, unless you go up higher. And I'm not sure anyone has a stomach for that. So we tried to get at least what's called 3 stories above podium. So the podium is the concrete structure which cars park under, but they're not underground. They're just under the building, which is elevated up. So in terms of the trail system.
Yeah, I mean the goal would be to connect the new trails to the existing trails. So sure, we would do that, yes.
Part of the master plan implementation committee, and just at a real high level, nothing that we've drawn has to or will be built, okay? So that's kind of number one. We went out to the public and had really good response, more than I've seen in a lot of master plans that we've done from the town of Northborough. So everything that we put here came from, I won't say you, I'll say us, because I also live in Northborough, but it came from us, so there's nothing here that, you know, Fancy West and Sampson wants to throw on us because they did it somewhere else. This was, everything here was homegrown. It's also important to know this is a very long-term plan, and in 5 years, so much can change depending on what's going on. I think some of the stuff that we have that's unique to Northborough, we were trying to capitalize on, which we've kind of ignored in the past. One thing being the Assabet River. It's such a beautiful walk if you go there and look at it, and we've got dumpsters there. You couldn't turn your back to it more than what we have. We have 5 or 6 gas stations in the middle of the town. We're sitting here saying, all right, we're gonna change the zoning. We don't want those in the middle. They're not conducive to a downtown, but they're there, so we have to deal with it. We've got the aqueduct, which is really cool. It's on the front page of everything that says Northborough, and this eventually ties into it. So this whole plan was really homegrown, and the intent was to try to put everything here. I think when you put the parking under the building, it's called podium construction, which you just mentioned. That's pretty typical across the country now for 2 reasons. It's very green because you don't have a parking lot and a building. You have the parking lot under the building, which allows you to have more green space. And it's open air. If you bury it, our costs were more like $80,000 a space, by the way, the last time we did underground. It has to be drained, it has to be fire rated, it has to be ventilated. This just has natural air going through when you're under a building, so it's really inexpensive, yet it's not unsightly because you can put nice screens where it's there. When you look here, you see a little bit of parking. You say, how you can have all those people live there with all that parking? But it's under the building, so it's pretty typical now. So a lot of the stuff here, it's not a matter of, here's what we're gonna have in a week or a year. This is really, it's a master plan, which means this is what we think we can do. We're listening to what everybody wants. We're trying to take advantage of some of the assets that we do have. And how do we make that work? In a downtown without people doesn't work. The more people that are downtown, and I think Lori addresses, the fewer cars we have. Because people who live downtown, whether you're at the north end of Boston, they're living downtown because they don't want a car. They want to be able to walk to everything. Now, they'll have a car, but they'll rarely use it because if we can get the retail and all the other synergies here, then they get to walk with what they would then. I want to go live downtown because I don't want to drive 2 miles, to get a donut or go to the bank or get my hair cut. And that's the whole reason, all this is trying to work together. Does it have to be 3 or 4 stories? Probably to get the density you want to make it work. So I'm just kind of spilling out a lot of the stuff that we heard from the people so you understand. And I think what's really wonderful is that it came from us. It came from everybody here. We had a ton of input when we had our first meeting here. And way more, we were sitting there saying, I hope we get 8 or 10 people. We had, 60 or 70? Yeah, 70, it's awesome that people here actually cared so that they're listening. And I think what's happened here with all the downtown stuff, it's one shot at it. And if things change, the master plan will change, but you have to have somewhere, you have to have a direction, and the direction comes from us, which is really kind of cool. But, I get excited when I see little opportunities with the rivers and things. We have that waterfall next to metal, whatever building. I mean, that should be such a cool thing to see that, and people don't even know it's there. And that's things that we have that other cities don't have. Shrewsbury doesn't have that. We do, so why not celebrate it? And put our hiking trails along that, which is really what we're trying to do here. So I throw that out there because it's not the final solution, and those aren't boxes. It could be Italianate if that's what the developer wants it to be. But right now they're just shapes claiming space to say, hey, this may work here. And it may not, but it's our best shot at where we are and where we want to go, given all the input from everybody. So just kind of throwing it out there so everybody kind of gets it.
Other questions? Go ahead.
So it looks like these are beautiful plans. I'm very excited. It looks as though 90% of the property is privately owned.
And so we had a separate business owners meeting after the first community meeting. We went out and informed all of the business owners in the entire area we're talking about here that we were working in this plan, and we had a separate meeting one morning in the room across the hall from here. We had, you know, a minimal turnout. We had about 10 or 15 business owners come, but all the business owners in town were given information about what we're doing and the ability to participate. So they're aware of this. And once again, as we're trying to emphasize here, there's no presupposition that anything will happen to negatively impact the desires of any of the private business owners in town. It's just going to be a cooperative effort and an ongoing education process for them to understand what's going on, and to the extent there's something they'd like to participate in with their own property, or at some point, if they're interested in selling their property, that we have a plan to follow for future redevelopment. But there has been at least an outreach to all the business owners in town. Jason?
Yeah, just to clarify that, when you say business owner, are you actually talking about the operators of the businesses, or are you talking about the property owners?
Both. Yeah, so I told the people who occupy the property and the owners of the property, both.
Thank you.
Great job. It's a lot of work that's put into it. I'm more concerned with what's going on now and what we'll do in the next couple of years, which I hope that will be the next thing to work on, because the purpose of doing all this was to improve the appearance and the vitality of the downtown. So we talked about the lights, the wiring underground, maybe putting some trees. We're working with a pretty tough set of homes. I think that many of the people that did come to these meetings before wanted to do, that was a big focus. And I think that was the bigger focus than what I see with so much housing. And I think that we need to start, it's great to have this forward look, but what are we going to do now? And what can we do in the next 2 years or 3 years to bring that downtown to at least look better and be more appealing for people to come to?
Yeah, I think we agree. There's certainly things in the public realm or things under our control to work on, and so we can start to bring forward, you know, projects in that area, sort of spec them out, cost them out, and, you know, decide, you know, how and when we could do them. There's certainly those kinds of things. And then, you know, as far as an actual property redevelopment, you know, we have a committee that's looking at what to do with our town offices right now, and we have people from our master plan committee on the committee that's looking at the town offices, so we have some interplay of ideas there. So there could be some possibility for 4 West Main Street, and as we've talked about, once the existing fire station is vacated and the new fire station is populated, that's a town-owned piece of property that has some really great potential. So I think a combination of some town-owned property, and as you've mentioned, some infrastructure things, are all things that could be done more in the shorter term. And then we'll just have to see, as Larry's mentioned, typically when private business owners start to see things happening, improving the environment in their area, that starts to generate enthusiasm on the private side. So hopefully we'd see that in Northborough also. I haven't heard from you. Good.
I was going to ask this follow-up to Lisa's question. Laura, you want to just mention what the status of the Complete Streets projects are, because many of those would be that first phase.
Yeah, sure. So we are a complete streets community, which means that we went through a prioritization process for sidewalks, where we wanted to see sidewalk improvements, enhancements, extensions, and we came up with a list of, I believe it was 25 projects, and then we ranked the projects, and there were, I believe, 5 downtown sidewalk projects that were identified that are within the top 10 list. So because we're a complete streets community, we are now eligible for up to $500,000 in grant funding to improve sidewalks. Now Route 20 is under Mass DOT jurisdiction, so we cannot use complete streets money to make improvements to Route 20. But these side streets that we're talking about certainly would be eligible for this money. So what I would like to do as a phase 1 project is to use the municipal funds to leverage even more grant money so that we can decrease the overall costs.
What streets are you
So
referring
Gale, so we have Pierce and Blake, and Gale and Monroe, as well as South Street. Hudson Street, there's a gap in the sidewalk that is a project. So those are pretty much the ones that are within the scope of this
So
downtown.
you're adding sidewalks, improving sidewalks, beautification?
Correct. Correct. Yeah, you know, for downtown project, of course, the DPW director and I don't necessarily agree, but for downtowns, I think that concrete sidewalks are the most appropriate material for a commercial district. He likes to go with the cheaper asphalt project. So there are some locations where we have asphalt sidewalks, which I'd like to replace with the concrete and the 6-inch vertical granite curb. And then, of course, the more pedestrian scale lighting instead of the ugly cobra heads that we have on the telephone poles.
Well, I think that your comment earlier, I think that's a good start in terms of just small incremental steps to make the town more attractive for those of us who are benefit for better.
Yeah, and as Jonathan mentioned, street trees are amazing. I mean, they make such a huge difference. And we started the pot project. I don't know if you folks have noticed the 4 planters that we have on the bridge. So that's the phase 1 of the pot project. I'll be buying 3 more pots and we'll be putting them in the downtown. So, you know, my hope is to have quite an array.
We even use a fundraiser for that as well. We even use a fundraiser for that, fundraise money from the general public for those funds.
Yeah.
I certainly won't do it myself. I mean, that was in place.
And I would like to do more banners. So there are banners, of course, that I see around Memorial. I think it's the 4th of July. But we could do so much more with banners. And if you sell the banners to the businesses, it's usually a easy sell. You can get $300 a pop. You do seasonal banners, so then you can do a couple a year at least. And when I did a project, I'd usually sell 40 banners once a year, because I did different seasons. And I would pocket about $9,000. So that $9,000 paid for more landscaping, it paid for the flowers, for the planters, and you know, it really gave quite a good amount of seed money to do fun things that, you know, we could enhance the plantings at the common. So that's my idea.
One question, right?
So 2 of the 3 projects or phases or
scenarios,
thank you, right across the street from each other, right downtown, and then there's Harvey, which is kind of downtown adjacent, but is a wonderful blank slate, essentially. So it's so attractive to really look at that. Do you see those 2 sections, or the 2 scenarios and then the 3rd scenario here, as being separate, or some way of interconnecting them, whether it be for pedestrian flow or for gaining excitement for the downtown project, which is probably more complicated if this is done first? I'm curious how you see the interrelationship between them.
Yeah, I think a lot is going to depend on what we as a town have control over at the beginning. So my sense would be our greatest areas of opportunity outside of infrastructure work, like Lisa brought up, would be the fire station and would be the town hall. To the extent that as those things were developing, if in fact we were working in the background to understand what was going on down at the Harvey property, and was there an opportunity to attract a private developer come in and do that, and the timing of that was such that could be done somehow in conjunction with some of the things we have control over, then it could sort of happen together. But my sense is that the redevelopment of the private property is going to be kind of a long series of steps. And to the extent that we can show some progress by making some infrastructure improvements earlier on, doing something with the town hall, the fire station, where it's becoming apparent that things are happening downtown, and they're happening in a way that's going to attract people to come in, want to spend time there, that we're addressing as we do that, some of the pedestrian access and some of the parking, at least specific for those areas, I think enthusiasm starts to build. And as we start to see either current private landowners raising their hands and saying, you know, we'd be interested in participating, how do we be involved? Or we start to find out there's some property that's going to come for sale, how do we work, have some aspect of that. So my sense still is that our greatest area for doing things right off the bat is in the public realm, unless something just starts to happen in the private area that just happens through serendipity to sort of work along with the rest of this. And to the extent that we can, you know, continue to develop our economic development capability in the town, so we started advertising and making it apparent to private developers we have these efforts going on. That would be helpful also.
So to sort of follow on that point, maybe we're too small of a town to have a full-time economic development manager, but that is something that, you know, that's a staff, it's a town staff, so it's going to cost us all taxpayers. But it's one thing to, you know, build it and make it come, or hope that the private, you know, sector sees the development and gets excited. It's another thing to actually, you know, kind of go out, kind of drum up business. Is there any plan for economic development?
Well, the report, the final report that's going to come from Weston and Sampson is going to include some recommendations around how to increase our ability to do economic development in Northborough. So the report will address that. Then it'll be a question of just how the town wants to pursue that over time. Julie.
So to get a little more specific to that last question, are there any projections on small retail success given the current way that people shop?
Turn that over to Russ as an expert on.
Well, that whole issue is sort of in flux right now nationwide because of COVID, and a lot of places are trying to figure out just what are we going to end up with. And people always want to go out and dine if it's safe. They want to go out and be entertained. So what we're trying to do is recognize the fact that some things may change, but some things are basically fundamental. As long as we can meet people's basic needs and create a fun environment for them, they'll want to participate. To what extent, how many square feet need to be dedicated to that, that's something we'll have to figure out over time. You know, that stuff is still being sorted out in every community in this country right now. One thing I did want to say, though, that as it relates to how these things get done, this is not something that is reliant on the town to do everything. It's intended for the town to be strategic about where it makes its investments to stimulate other people's investments. So we may find that in a couple months, some developer just takes the initiative and goes to a property owner and says, hey, I don't know if you saw those images, but I'm interested. I'd like to do something with you. Either buy you out, or we could be a joint venture. We'll get the town support. What do you think? These things sort of ruminate over time, and they come to fruition at some point in the future. And it may not require any intervention from the town. But in all likelihood, the town controls the public realm, where streets are, where sidewalks are, and they'll need some support to sort of maybe build out part of the public trails that are not on their property but need to be connected. So these are all sort of things that will be sorted out over time, but it's never intended to be a town-forward plan, so they have to do everything and buy every property. This is not enough money.
Okay.
A question really for you and the committee in providing direction on this study. I'm wondering, has there been any talk or any discussion as to what are the primary goals for this whole project? Are the important things, you know, residential, commercial, is it open space, is it traffic? What are the top 3 or 4, 5 things, you know, sort of in order that are here? As I said earlier, this seems to be very residential, somewhat commercial driven. And I don't know if that's really what the top goals aware of this or not?
So basically, the input we got when the master plan was completed back in 2020 about the downtown was overwhelmingly people wanted more retail, more restaurants, more places to gather, better parking, better pedestrian access, less impact of the traffic. I mean, the theme kept coming around and around and around. As we sat down, and when we wrote the RFP to acquire a consulting company to help us do this, that was the flavor that the master plan had indicated the residents of the town of Northborough wanted this kind of stuff, more of this in their downtown, and less gas stations and less traffic and less of this stuff. When the work began and the professionals got involved, the feedback started to come back during the development of the plan that there needs to be a residential component. And although the master plan addresses housing as a separate topic, and there was some talk in the housing topic about some housing in the downtown area, the housing component became more prevalent as the plan developed, only because Jonathan and Russ and others said that any towns that have been successful in redeveloping their downtown had a residential component. And I think part of it was because these different scenarios have been drawn independently, each one has a residential component built into it. Probably when you stand back and look at all the scenarios added together, I can understand, that there's a lot of residential built into this thing. But the point was that part of it came out as the plan was developed, that it couldn't just be restaurants and shops and cool little areas to get together and better sidewalks and things like that. There had to be some consideration given to residential. And as we've heard tonight, we'll think about going forward in the completion of the plan, we'll do that. But what we tried to do was produce a plan for downtown that made it easier to get around, had better parking, and had more retail and shops kind of thing involved in the downtown.
I guess if you expand or have them expand on that a bit more, I don't understand why the residential part of it all of a sudden has become that important, and maybe some examples of places where this was done and where and why you have to have that, as opposed to not having it.
Well, the proposition is, would anyone come to build a small little shop on Main Street and incur those costs when really you don't want just one little building to accommodate a 1,500 square foot user? You need a number of them to justify making that investment. One way you can sort of entice that development interest is by providing the residential that's going to support the shop. And that's how developers are thinking now. It's like, okay, we're not building single-use environments anymore. We're sort of mixing where people live with where they shop and where they dine. It's a synergy, particularly in downtowns, that we want to capture. So that's sort of the lead foot forward, as if you're going to create just those single-purpose spaces, we're probably not interested. We've been through shopping center development for 50 years, and we're moving into other realms now, particularly in an environment like this. So the question is, how are you going to get those people to the table? Because they're the ones that do this. This is not the town building shop space for future businesses. So how do you do that? That's one way you do it.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to dominate, but it seems to me that what you're describing is an area that has significantly more, or some, never mind significantly more, some public transportation access to get from residential to commercial, besides just walking. And I'm wondering if you can give me some examples of towns, not urban, not city, not even necessarily suburban areas where that has been what's happened and a success.
I think we heard that story.
So, if I could...
Is Millbury the example? Is that what you're telling me?
That is an example.
That is an example, but also, if you've ever traveled, so if you go to Europe, if you go to, Mexico, or any of these places, the traditional style of building, even in small towns, is you have a village center where you have the corner store, and then you have apartments, you have different style of housing. So, you know, I spent a semester abroad in Salzburg, Austria, which is a small city. And in the core, you have these little shops on the first floor, and then you have multi-stories of apartments. So that is the classic style of how humans have developed towns and throughout time. And the benefit is because you don't have to rely on a car. So you just walk down, you go to the corner shop, you buy dinner, you know, you go a couple of stores down, you get whatever else you need. So there are a lot of people who like to live that way. They don't like the suburban sprawl way of living that Northborough has. So they're looking for something else. So if you drive down West Main Street, there's huge examples of retail. You've got strip malls all over the place with no housing. So that's already been done here in Northborough. You have Northborough Crossing. There's a huge amount of retail in town for a community of only 15,000 people. So this is an opportunity to create a different environment, you know, more of the classic, you mentioned quaint downtown. So the old downtowns, if you go to Concord, if you go to Westboro, the units, the housing and the commercial is mixed together. So,
speak just a little bit to that. There's, if you go to the north end, the special of the day is whatever Dad wants up on the second floor, because they're cooking it down, and she's cooking it that night in the shop. So he says, I want, you know, prosciutto with melon, so that's what they're going to serve as their entree, because they live up, they work down, which is how the country was 100 years ago. And what happened was, and I'll elaborate on this, I spent a lot of time studying this. That was, back then it was called the Front Porch Society, where you sat in the front, you knew everybody, you walked to get your hair cut, you walked from the bank, you walked to get a donut, you walked to get a cup of coffee, everybody was healthier. Then we decided, hey, this doesn't work, we want to go to the suburbs. Then we bought a half an acre, everybody bought a house, and everybody had to own a car. And we found out that was broken, because when they abandoned the downtowns, they ended up getting dangerous because nobody lived there anymore. It was just you went in, and at night, you didn't hang out. When you go to Boston, and it's a bigger city, but it speaks loudly. The only reason Boston is really a safe town is our poor people, our bank people, our college students. In a normal downtown where you don't have 50 universities, they can get really dangerous at night. When you come back and live in the town, it's vibrant, it's alive, and everybody protects each other. It's also incredibly greener, where you have 10 people living above a house with 50 feet of water line, sewer line, and electric. Versus where I live, in the burbs, I have one house with the same water line, sewer line, electric serving just my house and my half-acre lot. So people now are going back to the fact that, wouldn't it be nice to live where I work? Wouldn't it be nice not to depend on my car? Wouldn't it be nice to help the environment? And that synergy between all the functions being in one spot. Like now, I can't walk from my house. I live on Brigham Street. I can. I mean, I get in 12,000 steps a day, but it's not like I want to walk to get a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, where if you're downtown, you will be able to walk and get a cup of coffee, and then you meet your friend. And then things really start to come alive. So that's a big part of why residential's there. You know, is that too much? Well, maybe it is, but it's a great opportunity because you have a bunch of apartments looking at the river. We actually pulled it off the river because at one time we had it on the other side because we said, no, let's let everybody enjoy the river, including the people that live on the other side. So there was a lot of that went into this. And I think Rick was right. We didn't address the residential as much as we should have Because I don't think the people that wanted what they wanted understood how much that could help them get what they wanted.
I'll take a question over here.
Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying.
Yep.
I think there's a difference between the city and Northborough, and I'll leave it at that.
Yep.
So I thank you. Thanks for that. I appreciate what you said.
So I agree with what you all are saying. So one thing, working with Upton a lot lately, and Upton has an EDC. There was a question earlier about not in Staten Island Development Committee, right? I believe it's volunteers. And so they were talking, one thing they're trying to do the exact same, they're a town of 8,000. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to do that, and their whole point is, and I've talked to people at the EDC, what they want you to be able to do is park downtown, and then you go to the cop, you do exactly what Dario was saying, and now the thing is, me, I live in Northborough, but I walk downtown, well, I go to get a piece of pizza, right, I spend some money. And literally, you're just walking downtown, and you're just, outside money is just being thrown and left at all of our buildings, and now our tax levy goes lower. Right, like I'm talking about owning a building, and the first two buildings, like the first one's for you, the second one is your break even, the third unit is where you actually start being able to put that money where you need to do the work on it. The economic models don't work without it. And then also, like, I didn't, Bush was trying to do this. I went in small places in Maryland where they literally, like Uber shoots out. These are just like suburban, like us. They closed off streets, they ripped out strip malls. Strip malls were a bad idea. More and more economic planners are saying how bad an idea this was. And they're closing them out. We just went traveling over April break, and they closed off the whole street and just restaurants. They just put tables on the streets. And everybody could get pizzas, and so we went to a taco place, but if the kids wanted pizza though, we could have gone to the pizza store, and the kids were running around drawing the sidewalk chalk. And people from out of town are just, again, out of town money is just being thrown all over the place. And if we're trying to kickstart and get stuff, I grew up in Worcester, it's kind of like what Lord was saying with Lumberware. Worcester's a two-headed turtle. Like, it could never get out of its own way. And it has, what, like 11 universities in city limits, but like if you're under 18, it's tough luck.
And you moved to Northborough.
And we moved to Northborough. My family moved to Northborough. And I talked to people in Worcester and I said, hey, when you graduate college, why would you stay here? I'm not going to. And at the end of the day, we need to be attracting younger families to come in here because otherwise we cannot shelter that burden. Like, we can't take that burden as we are right now.
Is there a question? Go ahead.
So first, 100% agree with Lori about how much residential is needed downtown. My question is, from experience, just going to property and building owners privately, I've tried this several times, because they know that the town wants it, the price that they're looking for becomes unfeasible with construction costs to make something work. So I wouldn't count on private property adding to this very much at all. So I'm more interested in what is the process going to be with the public buildings in terms of working with developers, because just from what I've seen from how it's going at White Cliffs, if it's the same kind of process, this is going to take 50 years.
Yeah, so basically, you know, the town, let's use an example. When the fire station is vacated and the new fire station is being used and that property is now vacant, you know, the town will have the ability through state, you know, required bidding, you know, procedures to advertise the fact that this particular property is available and there's a plan for what the town would like to see happen with it, and ask for private developers to bid, to respond to an RFP and say how would they satisfy, you know, this particular need. So I think having the plan, if we have some townwide agreement around the plan, and let's say that the plan for the fire station property, turning that into some sort of a combination shop, restaurant, with a park in the back and a path down by the Cold Harbor Brook, a certain amount of parking is kind of the idea that we're settling on for that. Then the town could produce an RFP that would ask for developers to say, how would you do that kind of thing? And there'd be, you know, an asking price for the property. And so that would be a little bit different than kind of the process that we went through.
What I'm saying is, are you choosing a specific asset type and building that is going to go there, and the bid has to be specifically for that? Or are developers going to be able to bid on a piece of property with a plan in mind, and it can be anything.
Well, I think if we're going to go through, I'm speaking a little bit out of school here now, but as the chairman of this committee that's been working on this for the better part of a year now, my hope would be that if we have an agreed upon kind of plan for what the development of that particular lot was going to look like, that reasonably we get it developed to look like that. The developer would have flexibility as to what they think they want to do, but it would fit conceptually what this plan is saying that property ought to look like.
I think just for example, like I have several ideas for 4 West Main Street that I would really want to do. But if the town says, well, we want to do this instead, well, then I may not even want to bid on it because I like my plan better.
Well, there's going to have to be an ongoing discussion and compromise between what the town wants and what developers want to do. But once again, I think we need, if we're going through the work to do the work we're doing and inviting all this community input and getting a plan that people say, yeah, that's kind of basically what we'd like to see, then I think it's incumbent on the town to eventually develop the property and kind of look like that.
When you get an RFP, you got to respond to the RFP, but you can add and subtract stuff that you suggest, but there will not be a gas station in that building.
So that's what you want to do.
So the town already owns the old town hall, which has been vacant for quite a long time. Couldn't that be like the spark? Why doesn't the town do something with it now?
Well, the town, I think, maybe Mitch can speak to that. I think the timing of when the town gets control of that back is if it hasn't happened already, it's imminent. And the town is analyzing what to do out their town offices. So a decision has to be made about.
So I think town offices aren't necessarily going to draw like suburban people to come and walk around and like.
Are you talking about the historic? You're talking about the
Where
fire
Tom's Market used to
station
be,
on
right?
Church Street.
Yeah.
So that the town already issued an RFP for that, I believe, a little over a year ago.
And
so, from what I understand, that land is in the process of being conveyed to a private developer.
No, she's talking about 4 West Main Street.
The the place where Tom's Market used to be.
The old town hall, which South Street.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about the old fire station.
If you want to address that,
the town owns that now, though, right?
do we own it now or is it?
For West Main, the town does not own yet.
But soon, but
That's the
why wouldn't
expectation,
that be
yeah.
the spark, because that's the closest to
Yeah,
town control?
I mean, I haven't been part of the master plan process. My gut feeling is there's going to be a combination of what do we do there and how does it interrelate with other things.
Right.
So you may have the idea of retail and offices and all these things, but there's not necessarily enough parking to support all those things or enough other facilities. So the plan needs to be done in conjunction with some additional thought. It is possible that could end up being town hall. It is possible that it could be some other things.
So how does that help?
But yes, I think your thinking is right that makes sense as being something for us to think about in the near future, whether we do it right now or whether we do it once a few other pieces are in place. Doesn't make sense because we will, in all likelihood, I expect we will own that building very, very, very soon.
That's why you do a plan, because you want to go out to the community, the general public, and say, we have this development opportunity, redevelopment opportunity. And it's in the context of this grand plan for downtown. If you're coming to do something that we don't want, then maybe this is not for you, but look at our plan and come with some good ideas that help further this vision. And that's how you sort of sort out who you want to attract to those sort of projects. You're right, that's an asset that we could use to sort of kickstart this, but no one's going to do anything there if anything grand, if they don't know what the context is, they're going to make that investment. So if they know that you're going to put in a trail system and that Blake Street's going to be a one-way street and you're going to have pedestrian environment, that's a different set of assumptions than if you just want me to do something with it. So I think you're both onto the same good idea, and I think we just need to make our way through that.
Any other questions? Well, once again, thank you very much for coming out tonight. The step is going to be to go back
take this, what we've heard tonight, sort of refine the plan again, and then we're going to have a third community meeting and just come back with kind of what kind of our final view of the plan is going to be. And then when that's all complete, Weston and Sampson will complete the report, include all of this in the report, and then there'll be a public presentation in front of the Board of Selectmen to present the final plan to the Board of Selectmen. And at that point, the next steps will start to be determined as to how we can do things and what can be done as far as, especially in the public realm, what steps can we take and how can we get things funded and get moving on the plan. So once again, thanks again, and we'll advertise when the next community meeting is going to be. Thank you.